Okay, let's unpack this. Think about trying to figure out if something actually worked,
Uh-huh.
like a new app, maybe, or a policy change.
Sure.
Our first thought is usually, well, let's just compare before and after.
Yeah.
Seems logical.
It does, on the surface.
But pinning down the real impact of that one thing, when everything else is changing too, that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
And today, we've got a method that's kind of like a detective for this exact problem.
Right, and it builds on that simple before and after idea, but makes it much more, well, rigorous. We were talking about difference in differences. DiD, for sure.
DiD? Okay.
Yeah, it's a smart way to use existing data. You look at a group that got the treatment, let's say.
The treated group.
Exactly, and see how they changed over time compared to a similar group that didn't get the treatment, the control group.
Got it.
It's become a real workhorse method for policy impact. Goes way back, actually, even used, believe it or not, by John Snow looking at the cholera outbreak in London.
Wow. Okay. History there. And for you listening in, we know you want the insights, quickly, but without missing the important stuff.
Definitely.
No long lectures. We've gone through the research, the sources you provided, and we're here to pull out the key takeaways. Think of it as your fast track.
Precisely. And those sources, they give us a great launchpad into some really cutting-edge stuff in causal inference. We're going to dig into a newer approach to D that honestly can show some surprising things.
Okay, but hang on. There's a catch with DD, isn't there? A core challenge.
There is. It really hinges on something called the parallel trends assumption, or PTA.
Parallel trends.
Right.
Explain that.
Basically, you have to assume that without the treatment or the event, whatever it is, the outcome you're measuring would have followed the same trend, the same path for both the treated group and the control group.
So you're assuming they would have stayed parallel if nothing had happened.
Exactly. And that's the tricky part. How do you know what would have happened?
Right. You can't. It's a hypothetical.
It's inherently untestable. You're imagining an alternative reality.
Okay, so that sounds like a major hurdle. How do we deal with that?
Well, that leads us right into the new method we're focusing on today. It's called the Difference in Differences Bayesian Causal Forest, DiD-BCF.
Whoa, okay, that's a mouthful. DiD-DCF.
It is. Stick with us, though. It's called a non-parametric model, meaning instead of forcing your data into a neat, predefined equation, like a straight line, it lets the data itself reveal the underlying patterns, however complex they might be. It's more flexible. And it's specifically designed for messier situations, like when the treatment doesn't start at the same time for everyone. That's called staggered adoption.
Right, like different states raising the minimum wage at different times.
Exactly, that kind of thing. And also when the treatment's effect might be different for different people or groups. Heterogeneous treatment effects.
So not just one average effect for everybody.
Precisely. It allows for that variation. It builds on what we know, but tackles these complexities head on.
So our mission today, then, is to really understand how this DiD-BCF thing improves on the DiD we might already know.
Yeah.
And what kind of new, maybe more detailed insights it can actually give us, especially about, who is affected and how much.
That's the goal. Let's start by maybe quickly revisiting why the traditional DiD methods sometimes run into trouble.
Okay, good idea. The standard approach.
Yeah. Often it uses what's called a two-way fixed effects model. TWFE.
TWFE.
Heard of it?
Right. It's a statistical technique, tries to account for differences between groups that don't change over time, and also general time trends that affect everyone. Then it estimates the treatment effect on top of that, usually gives you one number, the average treatment effect.
Seems reasonable enough,
Yeah.
but the catch is still that parallel trends assumption we talked about.
Exactly. It always comes back to that. And like we said, you can't prove it holds because it's about what didn't happen.
So what do researchers usually do?
Well, a common thing is to look at the trends before the treatment started, see if they looked parallel then. Makes intuitive sense. If they were parallel before, maybe they would have stayed that way.
Maybe, but it's not a guarantee, Just because they moved together in the past doesn't mean they wouldn't have diverged later for some other reason, right when the treatment hit.
Good point.
Plus, focusing too hard on proving those pre-trends can sometimes mess up the analysis in other ways. It's a bit of a minefield.
And real life is rarely simple, right? You mentioned staggered adoption.
Yeah, treatments rolling out at different times.
Yeah.
And heterogeneous affects different impacts on different units.
So the old TWFE model struggles with that.
It really can. When you have that staggered timing and varying effects, that single average number from TWFE, it can be Well, misleading. Seriously misleading.
How so?
It ends up averaging together comparisons that might not all be valid. It can become this weird weighted average where some treated units are actually acting as controls for later treated units. It gets messy.
Oh, wow.
The final average effect estimate could even have the wrong sign. It might suggest something helps when it actually harms, or vice versa.
So relying on that single average in complex cases could lead to bad policy decisions.
Potentially, yes. It's like trying to understand an orchestra by just listening to the average volume. You miss all the different instruments.
Great analogy.
And that's why there's been this surge of new DiD methods recently, trying to fix these issues.
Like the ones you mentioned earlier, Callaway and St. Anna, Sun and Abraham.
Exactly. Those methods are designed to be much more careful about which comparisons are made and when, especially with staggered adoption, to get more reliable estimates.
Okay, so the traditional methods have clear limits. Now let's get back to DiD-BCF. How does it tackle these problems differently?
Well, DiD-BCF takes the basic DiD-BD framework, but leverages machine learning. Specifically, Bayesian additive regression trees, or BART.
BART. Okay, break that down.
Think of BART like building a prediction model by combining lots and lots of simple decision trees. Each little tree captures a small piece of the relationship in the data.
Like little specialists.
Kind of, yeah. And when you add up all their simple insights, you get a very flexible, very powerful overall model that can capture complex, non-linear patterns without you having to specify them up front.
Okay, I can picture that. Lots of simple rules making something sophisticated.
Right. Now, Bayesian causal forests, BCF, build on BART, but are specifically tuned for causal inference for figuring out cause and effect.
Ow.
They cleverly try to model two things separately. First, what the outcome would likely be without any treatment, that's often called the prognostic function or the baseline.
Okay.
And second, the additional effect of the treatment itself, the treatment effect. And it allows that treatment effect to vary depending on individual characteristics.
Ah, so it separates the what would happen anyway from the what did the treatment add.
Precisely, which is often more realistic, right? The factors influencing your baseline health might be different from how much a specific medicine helps you.
Makes sense. So what's the special sauce in DiD-BCF?
The key innovation, the really clever bit, is this thing called PTA-based reparameterization.
Okay, sounds technical again.
It does, but the idea is elegant. Remember the parallel trends assumption that trends are parallel without treatment?
Yeah.
The DBCF uses that assumption. It basically tells the model, look, assume parallel trends hold. You don't need to waste effort modeling the what-if trend in the untreated state during the treatment period. Focus your learning power on estimating the treatment effect itself only when the treatment is actually active.
Oh, so it doesn't try to constantly model the hypothetical alternative reality.
Exactly. It sort of bakes in the parallel trends assumption and says, given that, let's just focus on estimating the deviation from that parallel trend caused by the treatment when it happens. It simplifies the estimation target.
I like that. Seems more direct.
It is. It lets the model concentrate its resources on the causal effect. And they often use a warm start approach, too.
Warm start.
Yeah, using a faster related algorithm called XBART to get a quick rough estimate first. This helps the main, more complex Bayesian model find the best answer more efficiently, like giving it a good starting point for its search.
Like a helpful hint for solving a puzzle.
Exactly. Speeds things up.
Okay, so DiD-BCF sounds promising in theory. Flexible, handles complexity, focuses on the effect.
Right.
But does it work? What did the simulations show?
Ah, yes, the simulations, they really put it through its paces. The researchers created artificial data sets designed to mimic all sorts of real-world complexities.
Like what?
Different types of relationships, linear, nonlinear. Different treatment timings, everyone treated at once versus staggered adoption. Different reasons for treatment random versus selection bias, where treatment timing depends on characteristics. And different effects the same for everyone versus varying effects.
Wow, okay. A real stress test.
Right.
What came out on top?
Well, let's walk through some of the scenarios. The DGPs, they called them data generating processes.
Okay.
DGP1 was like the simplest case. Classic disease setup, same effect for everyone. And guess what? DiD-BCF actually did better than the standard linear models, even though those models were technically correct for that simple world.
Really? So it doesn't get tripped up by simplicity?
Apparently not. It showed it doesn't overfit or get weird when things are straightforward. That's good.
Definitely. What about staggered adoption?
DGP2 added staggered adoption, but still the same effect size for everyone. Here, DiD-BCF performed very well again. often second best, usually right behind a method specifically designed just for that staggered setting, but still better than most other benchmarks.
Okay, holding its own. Now, what about when treatment isn't random? Selection bias.
Right. DGP3 had staggered adoption and selection bias based on things you could observe. And here, DDBCF consistently came out on top. Best performance.
Ah, that seems important.
It really highlights its strength in handling the kind of non-random assignment we often see in reality, where maybe certain types of counties or firms get a policy change earlier than others for specific reasons.
Yeah, that happens all the time. Okay, what about varying effects? The heterogeneity.
That was DGP4. No staggered adoption here, but the treatment effect depended on characteristics. And they looked specifically at how well the models estimated this variation in affects the conditional average treatment effect on the treated, or CAPTT.
And DDDCF.
It blew the others out of the water, basically. Significantly outperformed all the benchmarks in capturing how the effect changed for different types of units. This is huge if you want to know not just if a policy works, but who it works for.
That's the crucial bit, isn't it? Going beyond the average.
Absolutely. And finally, DGP5 threw everything in. Staggered adoption, selection bias, and heterogeneous effects. The most complex, most realistic scenario.
The ultimate test.
Pretty much. And even here, DDBCF didn't necessarily win on every single metric, but it provided the most stable, most reasonable estimates overall compared to the others. Some benchmarks really struggled in this complex setting.
So it proved pretty robust across the board.
Very much so. The consistent themes were its strength with nonlinearities, and, critically, its ability to uncover that heterogeneity, how effects differ across a population. Some other methods seem to need, well, maybe a lot more data to work well in the really complex cases.
Okay, impressive simulation results. But simulations are one thing. How does DDBCF perform with real data on a real policy question?
Great question. The researchers applied it to a classic. The effect of minimum wage increases on teen employment.
Always a hot topic. What was the setup?
They used a well-known data set, the MTDA data set, often used for demonstrating DiD methods. It has county-level teen employment data for the U.S. combined with state-level minimum wage changes between 2004 and 2007.
Okay, so states raising their minimum wage are the treated group, and the timing varies. Staggered adoption again.
Exactly. States that stuck with the federal minimum were the controls. Now, for this specific application, due to some data limitations, they focused on what's called the Unconditional Parallel Trends Assumption, UPTA.
UPTA. What's it mean here?
It's a slightly stronger assumption. Basically, it assumes the parallel trends hold just based on comparing states over time, without needing to control for lots of other specific county characteristics in the model itself.
Got it. So what did DDBCF find for the average effect?
The overall average treatment effect on the treated came out as anything 0.143.
Negative 0.143. So suggesting, on average, minimum wage hikes led to a decrease in teen employment.
That's the interpretation, yes. And interestingly, when they compared this to estimates from other methods on similar data reported in another key paper, DDBCF's estimate of the negative impact was actually larger, more negative than what was found using traditional TWFE or some other robust DD estimators.
So it points to maybe a stronger negative effect than previously thought with some methods?
Potentially for this data set and period. But here's where DDBCF really shines.
The heterogeneity.
Exactly. They used it to explore if the effect was different depending on the county's population size. They split counties into small, medium, and high population groups.
What did they see?
Big difference. For small population counties, the estimated effect was -0.164. Much stronger negative effect.
Okay.
For medium population counties, it was -0.132, less negative.
Right.
And for high population counties, it was -0.141, sort of in the middle, but closer to the medium group.
Wow. So the biggest hit to teen employment seemed to be in the least populated counties.
That's what the DDBCF results suggest, which is a much richer finding than just that overall average of a -0.143, isn't it?
Absolutely. It tells a different story. Does that match up with other research?
It does align with some other work suggesting state-level analyses might hide these local differences, and that smaller, perhaps more rural counties could be more vulnerable to negative employment effects from minimum wage hikes.
Why might that be? Any ideas?
Well, you could speculate, right? Maybe smaller counties have more small businesses with tighter margins.
Yeah, less ability to absorb costs.
Or maybe it's harder to pass costs on to consumers in less competitive local markets. Or the mix of industries is different, less diversified.
Lots of possibilities. But the point is, did DDBCF allowed them to see that difference.
Precisely. It revealed a nuance that a simple average effect would completely miss. That's the kind of insight that's actually useful for policy discussions.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. It really sounds like DiD-BCF is a significant step forward for DD analysis.
I think that's fair to say. The key takeaway for you is that it offers this flexibility to handle complex data patterns, nonlinearities, staggered timing, but its real superpower seems to be uncovering the heterogeneity.
Finding out how effects differ for different groups.
Yes, which gets us beyond simple averages.
And that feels like the big aha moment, right? This idea that policies, events, they just don't impact everyone the same way.
Exactly. And understanding that variation is just crucial if you want to make smart decisions or design effective interventions.
So hopefully for you listening, you now have a much better handle on this quite advanced method, DD-BCF, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
That's the aim, to give you the core ideas and why they matter.
So here's something to maybe chew on after this. Think about other policy debates or research questions you follow. How might the answers change or become richer if we analyze them with tools like DiD-BCF that are built to find these varied effects? What new insights might pop out?
That's a great question. It really pushes us to think beyond the average and consider the distributional consequences. Who benefits, who might lose out.
Exactly. It opens up a lot of new angles.
It certainly does. A powerful way to get a deeper understanding.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. We hope it's armed you with some new understanding of how we can better untangle cause and effect in our pretty complex world.